Let's now shift our attention to the other big story that we are tracking on WION. Now, the Air India AI 171 flight crash was one of the worst aviation disasters in recent times. The first preliminary report of the plane crash is out. What does the report actually say? And what lies ahead as part of this investigation? Take a look.
At 1:13 p.m. IST, the aircraft requested pushback and startup. 13 seconds later, air traffic control approved the pushback. When ATC asked, the crew confirmed that they needed the full length of the runway 23. At 1:25 p.m. IST, the aircraft requested and received taxi clearance. Around 1:32 p.m. IST, control of the flight was transferred to the tower. At 1:33 p.m. IST, the aircraft was instructed to line up on runway 23. At 1:37 p.m. IST, the aircraft was cleared for takeoff. 3 seconds later, the plane began its takeoff roll. At 1:38 p.m. IST, the aircraft crossed V1 speed, which was the takeoff decision speed. Now the plane reached 153 knots and then reached VR rotation speed of 155 knots. Plane's liftoff was then confirmed as sensors switched from ground to air mode. At 1:38 and 42 seconds, the aircraft achieved 180 knots, which is its maximum recorded airspeed. The Boeing aircraft appeared to be moving as procedure as per the preliminary report, with no anomalies reported in communication or aircraft behavior. And then suddenly, both engines began to shut down. Fuel cutoff switches for both engines transitioned from run to cutoff. Just 1 second apart. Now this immediately cut fuel supply to both the engines, causing them to lose power. The engines began losing thrust immediately. At 1:39 and 5 seconds IST, the pilot issued a distress call, Mayday. Now, what happened in the cockpit? The flight was being operated with First Officer Clive Kundar as the pilot flying and Captain Sumit Sabharwal as the pilot monitoring. This is a standard agreement where the more junior pilot flies when the senior captain monitors and manages the flight. Now, according to the AAIB, one of the pilots is heard asking the other, "Why did you cut off?" The other pilot responded that, "I did not do so." The report doesn't specify which pilot made which statement. Now, what are the key findings of the preliminary report? Well, pilots had made the attempt to save the aircraft within 10 to 14 seconds of the fuel cutoff. They moved both fuel switches back to the run position. Both engines began automatic restart sequence, but the recovery was ultimately impossible due to insufficient time and altitude. Now, the aircraft was only about 625 feet above the ground when the engines failed. It's important to note that engine restart procedure requires significantly more time than the 29 seconds which were available before impact. The other key findings include that the flap setting was correct and the landing gear was down. There was no report of bird activity or weather concerns. Also, the aircraft weight was within normal limits. It also said that the pilots were experienced enough, medically fit and well rested. Now, what happens next? The Aircraft Accident Investigation Bureau has stressed the information in preliminary report is subject to change. Well, the investigation continues with several key areas of focus while initial analysis has been completed. Investigators are conducting detailed examination of approximately 49 hours of flight data and 2 hours of voice recordings to uncover additional clues. Now, detailed analysis of limited fuel samples recovered from the aircraft, mechanical examination of fuel control switches and related components to determine if they malfunctioned. A final report, which will attempt to determine the probable cause and make safety recommendations, is expected to take months or potentially years to complete.
All right, let's also now take a quick look as to what the experts have to say on the 15-page preliminary probe report on the Air India flight AI 171's crash in Ahmedabad, which is India's worst aviation disaster.
Whatever little has come out, the preliminary report, which is 15 pages, which I have not been able to read clearly, but it appears that the fuel was cut off on takeoff. So whatever fuel the engine had, it was able to take off.
If there was an engine failure, that is only when the RAT deploys, and when the RAT deploys, the only normal course is to restart the engines. Now, it has been reported in the past that those switches, the fuel cutoff switch or the fuel switch to run and cut off, those have tripped and gone back to cutoff positions several times in the past. We've seen it with quite a few incidents.
Next steps, as I mentioned, is to go into the complete sequence as to how this whole thing unfolded. They will definitely have to look at the FedEx. They will definitely have to see if there was a miscommand. They'll definitely have to see were there any faulty sensors. They'll have to definitely look into any electrical, any software glitch that was happening, which could lead to all of this. So right now, again, as I said, it's at a preliminary stage that this has come out.